Back with us on the SportsMax zone. The twin issues of race and the discrimination are rarely far from the forefront in the wide world of sport. Our next story concerns former South Africa Test captain and the director of cricket, Graeme Smith. Smith is breathing easy today after an independent arbitration panel cleared him of racially discriminatory conduct. Smith, along with his former teammate and the current senior men's head coach, Mark Boucher, were accused of prejudicial conduct in a report published by South Africa's Social Justice and Nation Building Committee. The allegations date back to 2013 when Smith served as South Africa's Test captain and include events as recently as 2021 when he served as the country's director of cricket. These are the three claims against Smith plus the attendant findings by the arbitration panel. Claim 1. Smith as captain influenced the decision to exclude former wicketkeeper batsman Thamo Solekile from the 2012 Test series against Australia and the 2013 series against New Zealand based on prejudice. The panel found that it was a non-race-based reason, a cricket reason, not to select Thamo Solekile. Claim 2. That Smith, in his capacity as director of cricket, appointed Mark Boucher as head coach. Boucher's appointment displaced Enoch Nkwi, while Smith's decision was cited as discriminatory. The finding by the arbitration panel was that both Boucher and Nkwi were able coaches. Boucher had over a decade of international playing experience, while Nkwi had limited international experience. Claim 3 against Smith was that he was not willing to report to former CEO Thabang Moreau and was deemed as being racially biased against black leadership at Cricket South Africa. The finding by the arbitration panel on this claim was that Smith willingly reported to a previous board that included 7 out of 9 black directors. Smith also subsequently reported to a black interim chairman of the board, Judge Zach Yaqub. Fazeer Mohammed joins us to discuss this matter. Good afternoon, Fazeer. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, George. Good to be on the show. It's an interesting idea that you mentioned that Graeme Smith will be breathing a bit easier, maybe from a legal standpoint. But I don't think this is just about the legality of it, because I could tell you today is Thursday, and you can't say, well, for sure that it was my intent to lie, to deliberately mislead. How do you prove intent? How do you prove, as in this case, racist intent? I'm not saying that Graeme Smith is a racist by any means, but it's so very difficult to prove. But in an environment like South Africa, I think he will feel very uncomfortable with the allegations that would have been put against him, even though he's been cleared.
And on that point, Fazeer, what do you make of the comment from some quarters that Smith has been a beneficiary of white justice?
Again, you know, I didn't read the full judgment in itself, and I would like to think that it was judged purely on the basis of the evidence. But again, you cannot ignore the historical antecedents and the situation in South Africa, and it is about privilege for the white minority in South Africa, and therefore there will be that feeling, even though you can't prove it definitively. One thing I can tell you, even if it can't be proved in the case of Graeme Smith, I don't know how Mark Boucher could be allowed anywhere near a South African team, given the fact that he admitted making nasty, disparaging remarks about Paul Adams, and then proffering the excuse, which probably made it even worse, that he was not given the training post-apartheid to properly understand what he was saying or what he was saying. So the reason I draw that in is to get a better sense of the understanding that for a lot of these white players, former white players, we even had Joe Root saying that he had never experienced racism in Yorkshire because for him, it doesn't exist. So again, it's very difficult to prove these intangible things, and therefore, as difficult as it is to say that Graeme Smith is guilty of racism or not guilty, the environment is one in which it leaves so many assumptions and a general belief that there would be institutional favoritism in favor of white players and former players.
Yeah, the thing I'm struggling with, Fazeer, having reviewed much of the literature around this issue, is that if you notice, one of our authors speaks of tentative findings by the committee which brought these charges against Graeme Smith, was that you know how courts work, Fazeer. You know that when there's a matter, you have a pre-trial hearing to ensure that the matter really warrants going to court. Yeah, you have that kind to look at the material available and everything else. So I'm saying, in a society as advanced as South Africa, we know it's very backward in many respects, but where the jurisprudence is concerned, there is a fair assumption to make that they know what they're doing, judges, justices, advocates, and people of a like mind. And I struggled as this case was unfolding to reconcile, Fazeer, the fact that here were these allegations, and all along it didn't seem as if the individual claims were backed up by the kind of evidence that would convince an independent arbiter or independent arbitration panel to side with the body making the claims against Graeme Smith. That was clear to me from day one that, yeah, the claims themselves are weighty, but the supporting evidence, I don't see it. And so said, so done. The findings of the arbitration panel, Fazeer, was that for each of the claims, there was a distinct lack of evidence to support the claims made. And I felt that proper handling of this thing from the start would have made clear that we were on a hiding to nothing if we went forward with this thing, because we couldn't sway an arbitration panel to find in our favor.
I think, I understand the point that you're making, and let me make it clear. I don't understand the legal system anyway. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I don't because I really have no time for a lot of these nuances and so on. But in this point, George, it's very, very difficult to prove these things, because they are so much about subtlety. They are so much about inference. They are so much about not what you say, but the way you didn't say something. It's extremely difficult to prove, George. And when you're talking about such a highly charged environment like South Africa, how do you prove, for example, that, the way I've been treated in the dressing room, nobody said anything to me, nobody said anything untoward to me, but I can tell that I am not wanted. How do you prove that? How do you go about proving something that has a lot to do with the way you feel about a particular environment?
But you see, I take your point on that, but here's my disappointment now. So you speak about proof. In the case of the wicket keeper who says he wasn't picked because he was black, the only supporting evidence accompanying that claim was his word. And we know that that same guy had allegations proven against him. So I don't know if it was a stitch-up or whatever to make him seem like a witness who couldn't be trusted, whose word was not credible. But the fact is, the man making the claim speaks for himself to say, well, I felt that A.B. de Villiers shouldn't have been picked ahead of me, and A.B. de Villiers was picked because he was white. I wasn't picked because I was black. That was the only man to support that claim. Then on the stand, Fazeer, the same man says, well, yes, I agree that it was right to pick A.B. de Villiers because he offers an X factor as a batsman who can wicket keep, and picking him to perform both roles frees up a spot for an extra batter to be picked at number 7. My gosh, Fazeer, when you make the claim, go on the stand and give that kind of evidence. You aren't doing your case any favors, and it's only you who's supporting that claim. So that's what I mean about the evidence being flimsy. The other part of it, I'm coming to you now, is that in the case of Mark Boucher, they say that, look, Mark Boucher was appointed as captain because he's Graeme Smith's, as coach, because he's Graeme Smith's friend and he's white. When really and truly, when it was examined, what was wrong with the Boucher appointment was that the job wasn't advertised. It's almost like it's a direct contract. You went, found your man, picked your man, put him in place. And Smith was able to rely on the evidence for you that, look, but when you came to me approaching me with the director of cricket job, I told you at the start that if and when I take this job, I intend to bring Mark Boucher on as my coach because he's perfect for the job. So that was wrong. What was wrong with the appointment? But there was no evidence to say that Boucher got the job because he was white. That, my friend, is what I mean about the lack of evidence.
I hear you on that, George, but let me tell you what I think happened with this situation. You had individuals, former coaches, and so on, with a deep sense of hurt and injustice.
True.
They knew they didn't have the evidence. They just wanted their story to be told, George. And this is the thing. sometimes it's not about seeing somebody drawn and quartered or hung out to dry. It's about telling your story and your experience, and at least putting it out there that this is what you experienced. Look, I don't have the proof. I know that this happened. I can't prove it, but I just want you to understand. This is what I experienced in this environment. You be the judge. If there's nothing there as far as the legality of it is concerned, fine. But you talk to players of color in South Africa, and they mutter for days on end about what the hurt that they feel. And it's almost a sense of, well, you know, just be quiet, play the cricket, and you'll be able to enjoy your life. And it's been welling up for a long, long time. And many players use this opportunity to bring it forward, even if they didn't have, George, that sort of evidence that you were demanding.
Yeah, Faz, and you know, looking at this verdict now, the players that are currently in the system, the young ones that are coming up, would they feel a bit dejected as to, you know, well, another case that has been swept under the carpet?
Well, again, the official line is that it has not been swept under the carpet, that it's been properly analyzed from a judicial, legalistic point of view. And whether or not young players will be taking notice of this, we can only tell with the passage of time. But really, it's up to those involved with the system to show that that inherent prejudice and discrimination is gradually being removed. One of the fundamental issues is the fact that the white minority still control much of the media, much of the narrative. This is the same as we talk about the colonial masters, how they present, for example, the West Indies Test Series victory, and how they were very reluctant to give the West Indies credit, to give Kyle Mayers credit, and they were over about how poor England were. And that is the narrative, Mariah, that it's very difficult to get your line across, your story across in an environment where the minority continue to control the narrative.
Yeah, Faz, I want to say two things here. One of the headlines that I had seen had said that he is cleared of racism but suffers reputational damage that may never be repaired. Is there an inference in that headline that fits what you're talking about, that in the hearts of many black people in South Africa, Graeme Smith is racist? It's just that he wasn't found guilty.
Well, absolutely. As I said, I had opportunity to speak to Graeme Smith a number of times. I interviewed him as recently as the 2019 Cricket World Cup about a similar situation. And he was very forthright about it. And I've always found him to be very, very straightforward. But again, people can be, how can I say, unconsciously racist, if that makes sense, that they do things they think is perfectly normal because this is how they've been brought up, this is the environment. And it's only when it's brought to their attention that it become aware of it, but they may not have been deliberately racist. But you're right, reputational damage. And again, Lance, forgive me for repeating it. I cannot for the life of me understand why Mark Boucher is still involved in South African cricket, given what he said about Paul Adams, and worse yet, given the pitiful excuse that he offered. And again, it brings back to that situation where those controlling the environment,
yes,
those controlling the narrative, those who will paint you as a rabble-rouser looking to cause trouble in the already troubled waters of South African cricket, and you're almost beaten down into silence by a minority who can continue to control that narrative. So yeah, reputational damage.
Yeah, and finally for me, Faz, I've spoken to West Indies cricketers who played against Graeme Smith, and I can tell you that there are many of them who feel that he was racist. Remember the 2005 series in Antigua, where Waver Hines was fined his entire match fee because of a confrontation with Graeme Smith. And Graeme Smith, in that hearing, angrily denied issuing racist remarks directed at Dwayne Bravo. And he was cleared, but Hines was fined his entire match fee. But I remember that series being one where the West Indies players were very uncomfortable with Graeme Smith's attitude towards them as black players.
And he's not the only one. It's just that it's very difficult to prove. It's very difficult in an environment where, again, it's about subtlety. It's about a wink and a nod. It's about how people look at, how people reference you. You can always find instances, and that's where the difficulty comes in, Lance, Mariah, and George, that you have players who feel deeply hurt about their experiences, who feel sidelined, who feel marginalized, who feel humiliated. But they know when it comes to the burden of proof, they cannot come up with the definitive evidence, and that hurt remains. And that, for many, might say, look, for what it's worth, I just wanted to get my story out there, even though at the end of it, no one has been convicted of anything.
Yeah, a lot of truth spoken today. Thank you very much for your contribution, Fazeer. We will pick it up again on another topic.
Take care.
Excellent. Back with more on the SportsMax Zone after these. Thank you for watching SportsMax on YouTube. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay informed.